So welcome back to Surviving Minecraft. As you can tell, I've been a little bit busy breeding up all these little bunny rabbits. They managed to get out of their cage, unfortunately. But the rabbits aren't the reason we're here today. Not at all. Actually, oh, there goes one. That's what the rabbits tend to do after you feed them. They go kind of nuts. But anyway, that's not what the goal is for today. Today, I'm going to try to get a whole bunch of supplies because I want to finish that build at the creeper farm. Because what I really need to do is come up with a way to farm a whole bunch of that new nether wood. I forget what it's called. It's like warped nilium or something like that. I don't know. But I need to come up with a way to mine a whole bunch of it because we're going to be building that ship today. The only thing is I don't have nearly enough wood. So that's what we're going to work on. But first, let me get rid of these rabbits.
Oh yeah, buddy. Oh yeah. You like it? Oh yeah, there you go. Oh yeah. These rabbits gonna die. These rabbits gonna die. Where you gonna go?
Ooh. Look at them all. They all just kind of whoop, fall to their death. Oh, that's so sad. Look at them all. Look at all that free rabbit food. Well, I guess you guys are all that's left, so I guess y'all got to get back to breeding. Otherwise, we're not going to have any more rabbit to sell. Okay, so luckily the rabbits gave us pretty much everything we need. But if you come over here, I'll show you kind of what we got going on right now as far as my wood farm goes. It's not exactly the greatest. It's still a manual farm. And basically, we just come in here and chop down the trees and then collect everything. It's not the greatest. I mean, it works, but it takes a long time and it's kind of a pain in the butt to do. And I know that this particular thing won't exactly work for the new warped nilium. Let me show you what I mean. So if we come in here and you take some of this warped nilium, we're going to take one of the warped fungus and some bone meal. I've got plenty thanks to my wheat farm. And we're just going to place it down right here. And then when we go to place the actual mushroom, here's what happens. This is the thing that's kind of annoying. Oh, well, besides almost killing me, it produces a whole bunch of this stuff on the outside. I forget what this stuff's called. Let me grab my hoe real quick because, you know, we got to protect our hoes. And, yeah, what is this stuff called? Warped wart block. Okay, those things take up all the space and they don't despawn. So, like, if I chop this tree down, well, I don't even know if it's a tree, but I can chop it down and it doesn't go anywhere. So it's kind of a little bit of a hassle. At least these trees will start to despawn. These ones don't. So it's either I manually do this and then have to go back through with the hoe and just take care of everything, or I try to come up with a way that we can actually farm this stuff. Now, I know there's a couple farms out there right now, but I don't really want to use something someone else made. So I kind of think what I'm going to do is go into creative and see if I can develop something on my own. Just something that'll work. It's not going to be the most effective thing, but just something that'll help speed it up so that way we're not wasting a whole bunch of time just farming this stuff. It may take me a little while to get it built, but in the long run, it'll save me a ton of time. So I think that's what we're going to do. Mr. Kitty, what do you think of my idea? Think it's a good idea?
Sounds good, Jokes.
Okay, Mr. Kitty, that's what we'll do. Would you guys be quiet? You guys are just so loud for no reason. Thank you. Gee, Baliba, those guys are loud. Oi. Okay, so I learned a few things about making these trees.
Hey, you want to buy something?
Hello? What are you doing down there?
I'm selling stuff.
Hey, you're not welcome here, buddy.
It's a really good deal.
Anyway, I've been spending some time in the creative world kind of designing stuff with these trees, and I discovered a few things. One, I didn't realize how big these things can grow. I needed to make an area that was 9 by 9 by 27. I mean, it's massive. But I think I have an idea how we can use this in the actual realm. So like when I come down here, basically the way this is going to work is I'll basically be able to come in here, place down some fungus, feed it, and then eventually it'll grow. But we'll get mainly just the wood because it's looking for an area to spawn. So this should work for what I need it to. But instead of building a giant like glass tube, I'm just going to dig it underground. So that way we have this solid block in the survival world. Because this is just temporary. The idea is that then I would be able to come up here, go down, basically dig it out, and then reset and do it again. So I ended up coming up with this little like redstone design. It's very basic right now. I'm still kind of tweaking it because as you can see, this thing basically grows way too tall and it's kind of a problem. So I would need to make it a little bit taller and I would need to secure it completely. So eventually I'm going to make this full-on farm. The only problem is that in order to make this farm, I need honey blocks. So that means here pretty soon I think we're going to have to make a honey farm. Because in order to make this work, you have to stack both honey on top of slime. That way you can actually get this thing to move. But it is working. It is definitely something that can do it. So like if I come here and then let's get some bone meal And what I'll do is I'll show you basically how this thing works. So this one, the way this one works is you plop this in, it'll load it up. And then once it's loaded, obviously I'm going to have this automated so to do it automatic. But I push the button. Oh, shoot. Right now I just got to hook up to a button. So when I hit the button, it just slides it over. And then we put it into a feed tape basically. So it's the same kind of thing. It's going to go into this little observer here, which is going to fire this. Long story short, the way it's going to work is I'll be able to feed this tube of like trees, which will eventually it'll be a lot taller. It could be up to 27 blocks tall. And it's going to feed it into like a demolition area. So that's eventually what we're going to do, but we can't do that yet because, you know, again, we need honey blocks. So for right now, we're going to focus on just building this thing in the real world so that way we can get enough of this, because this is kind of the concept for what I'm going to be using on the ship is, you know, we're going to be making like a ghost ship, and I think something like this might look cool for the sails. I got a few other designs I'm working with for the actual ship, but this should give you a little bit of a preview for what we're going to be coming up with. So let's go back into the world and start getting this thing going, start harvesting a bunch of these logs. So let's do it. Okay, so since this is going to be where we're going to be building this thing out, I figure this is as good a spot as any to actually build this thing. So we're just going to kind of go from here and go 27 blocks down. 25, 26, 27. Okay, so that's far enough. There's one spot up there where we're going to have to build a little bit, but this should work. Okay, so we got this all the way dug out. I filled up all the space in there, so it's pretty solid. So now all I got to do is have a way to get back up. So I'm going over here about 5 blocks. So that way I can get all the way up to the roof and back. So I just need to have like a little drop chute and a little way up. So that's what I'm going to do real fast. Okay, so this is going to be the little drop chute. And then this is going to be where we put the little water tower. So that's what we'll do next. Okay, so now we'll go down here. We'll just dig this down. But yeah, so I'm just going to dig this all the way down to the level where that thing was. There we go. Bada bang, bada boom. So then now I just got to go back up, dig this down, and we're going to turn this into a little drop chute. So we'll just plop that down there, and then we should be good. Now we'll just dig this sucker down. We should get there in no time. There we go. All right, cool. So now we got an easy way in. The only other thing we need to do is we're going to place these nylium blocks. So it should be like this. I'm putting 2 because sometimes this thing will despawn, but luckily all you got to do is put more bone meal on it, and it should work. So now we should be able to just plop that there, and then plop on some bone meal, and boom, we got a tree. Now we'll just take this up real quick. I really need to get that soul sand. This is going to take forever. All right, made all the way up to the top. And how far up is it? It's a little bit of a drop, but I think it'll be okay. I think what we can do is if we have our water bucket, we can just use the water bucket to drag us down. So if we just take some water like this, we should be able to go in there and we'll just catch the bucket as we fall. So we'll just go like that, let it drop a little, and then grab it. It'll take us all the way down, and then now we can just chop this up. I don't think I have my hoe on me, but now look. Super easy. You just go all the way down, boop, boop, boop. And look, yeah, see, that's what I'm saying, it despawns. So now we would just replant this sucker, take some of the bone meal, boop, boop, boop. I don't know why I did that, but okay. Plop that there. And boom, and then we just rinse and repeat, and I'll just do this for a little while, which I'll get this fixed, and then I'll just get a whole bunch of this wood. Time to get to grinding. So we have a pretty good amount of wood so far. I would say that this isn't terrible, but we're gonna need a lot more if I want to build this build out. So the way that this is gonna work is we're gonna need a ton, and I think what I need to do next is make one of these shifting platforms. So that way we can actually make more of the mushrooms, because I am completely out. I've only got the crimson fungus, which is not what we need right now. So that's what I'm going to do now is work on making one of those little platforms. It shouldn't be that difficult. I think we're mainly just going to need pistons and some levers and stuff like that. So I'm going to get started building that real quick. So luckily we don't need a very big one. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to lay out like a little platform. Nothing too crazy. Maybe just like a 3x3 area, something like that. Doesn't need to be excessively big, and this should be more than enough. I'm just going to plop one of the nyliums in there, because the cool thing about this is we can just spread it. So just boom, boom, boom. Look at that. All right, we already got some. So that's pretty good. So what I can do is I can actually automate this so it's actually a lot quicker. And then I can just flip a button, it'll do its thing, and then we should be good. So the first thing I did was place down a dispenser under the warped nylium. That way it'll dispense bone meal right into the dirt. Then what I did is I laid out a bunch of pistons on the side, leaving a 1-block gap. That way it has room to push it side by side. This design took a little bit of redesign here and there because, well, turns out that the observer doesn't see the change in the top of the block, so I had to move it up and redo some wiring. Not a big deal. So then all I did was create a redstone clock that I could use to turn the dispenser on and off. Basically, all it is a redstone torch, 3 blocks, a repeater, and a speck of redstone dust. Turns out you have to toggle it. It's this weird new function that they have in 1.16. This is a pretty simple redstone device, but I would say it was very effective for what it is. Alright, so this thing's been working pretty well. As you can see, it's just kind of going and ticking away, and we're getting all kinds of mushrooms and all kinds of stuff. Occasionally, oh, I think we're out of bone meal, but occasionally it lags a little bit, but for the most part, this thing works pretty darn fast, and luckily I got it switched off so that way I can just do that. If I ever need to, I can just go in here and then refill this thing up, but I'm pretty sure it's empty. Just need to click in there. Yeah, okay, so we're out. It's fine though, because we have plenty of stuff. So yeah, we got a full stack here. We got this. So if I get more bone meal, we can definitely make some more. But yeah, so I guess now all we need to do is go back into the hole and start mining the rest of these little warped nylium tree things, whatever they're called. Okay, so I think that after this one, we should have more than enough of this wood. I've been chopping this stuff down for a little while, and yeah, it's been working really, really well. I really like the way this thing's set up because, yeah, I'm not getting a lot of the other blocks that I wanted, but I'm getting plenty of wood, which is the main thing I need for this build. So this has been working out very, very well. And then all I did was I also went up here and I reorganized a little bit so that way we'll have more space for when we build this thing out, because right now I needed a little bit more room because it's a little bit too close. But yeah, I mean, to give you an idea, yeah, we have quite a few things of warped nylium, or is it warped stem and warped planks. So I mean, we have just tons of this stuff. So I think I finally have enough to actually start working on this build. So I think that's what we're going to do, is I'm going to get started working on this thing. And I think there's no better way to do that than a time lapse. So let's hit it. So when I first started this build, I made one giant mistake. And that's that I didn't build it in creative first. I decided that I wanted to tackle this thing completely in survival and just kind of go with the flow and see what happens. Now this would normally be okay, but considering that I have very limited experience when it comes to building, let alone building ships, it just means that this was going to be a very difficult task. So the very first thing I needed to do was build up the hull. I used some upside down staircases and just kind of went with that, and I was just slowly shaping it out. And you know, mistakes were made from time to time. I kind of damaged my creeper farm just a little bit, but nothing that couldn't be repaired. So as I built out the hull of the ship, it's a very basic shape on the sides. It basically just comes out and curves a little bit. But the one thing I wanted to avoid was making this thing look like an upside down pyramid. So I had to figure out a way to add some extra shape to it. So one of the more challenging parts about this build is going to be doing the rear end on this thing. A lot of these older ships had what was a rounded, almost square-shaped rear end. It was very odd to build because you couldn't do it just like a flat edge. You had to kind of work with the curves. And because it was such a large build, it was very hard to get the scale proper. Initially, it looked almost like an upside-down pyramid, which is not what we were going for. So I decided to switch gears and work towards the front of the ship. Now for the front of the ship, it was a little bit more tricky because it had to curve in as well as out. It was a very odd shape. And I'm slightly dyslexic, so it didn't quite come out the way I wanted to the first time. But luckily, it's a pretty easy fix, unlike trying to figure out the rest of this curve. What I found was using a bunch of stairs and slabs and just regular bricks seemed to work really well at creating this shape of giving it a rounded, curved, almost cone-like shape. And the very bottom needed to be basically flat. Less than 2 minutes in and already my ship's full of water. I had to use a bunch of blocks to take care of that. One of the biggest tips I have for anybody that's wanting to attempt a large build is sometimes it's good to sit back and take a look at the build from a distance, because it's really hard to get an idea of what this thing's going to look like with scale. So after a few more coffee breaks, I decided to work on getting this thing a little bit more 3D by working on the front of the boat. What I did is I work on the one side and then I just basically do the same thing on the other side. I used a combination of stairs and blocks and just kind of worked with the shape until I got what I was looking for. it was kind of tricky getting it to work just right, because sometimes if I used just blocks, it didn't look right, and if I used just stairs, it didn't look right. So it was just a matter of kind of balancing that all out just to kind of carry it over so we didn't end up with an upside down pyramid. And I mean, at this point in the build, I was happy with how it was coming out, but it still needed a lot of work. It was a very, very basic shape. I mean, you can kind of tell it looks like a boat, but it definitely needed something more. A lot of the shapes in this boat were just looking a little too symmetrical, and I really needed to find a way to break it up and give it more life. And that's when I came up with an idea. A lot of these boats had windows in the sides, or they would have some sort of turret where they would put cannons and stuff. So I decided, since this is going to be a ghost ship, what I wanted to do was add a bunch of windows that gave it a ghostly appearance. The only problem was I kept running out of wood, so I had to go and use my farm to generate a lot more of it. And it was a lot of grinding, but we got it done. You'd be surprised just how much warped stems this thing went through. It is incredible how many you go through when you build something to this scale. And speaking of scale, because it got so big, I needed to put a big dirt path around it so that way I could actually use scaffolding blocks, because I was having trouble reaching all the spots that I needed to place blocks. So after a while of fiddling around, I finally came up with a design for the windows. So I ended up going with a design where I used a lot of these shroom lights, basically hidden by a bunch of fences, so it looked like an old school style window. I thought it looked good. The only problem was I placed them all in the wrong spot, and well, it doesn't look quite right, so it turns out I put everything one block too low. So I had to go and chop it all up and do it again. That's the challenge of building in survival. Nothing's ever as easy as you think it's going to be. It's usually twice as hard. Even the simplest of tasks can turn into such a big hassle. It doesn't matter because we take care of everything one block at a time. So after we solved that little fiasco, I just moved on to finishing the windows, and I think it looked really, really good. I mean, it's really starting to look like a ghost ship. You can't really tell so much in the day, but once it gets dark out, it looks really eerie, and I'm loving the shape of this ship. Now it's just a matter of breaking it down and making it a little bit more detailed. This part was kind of tricky for me because I've never really built anything of this shape before in Minecraft. It's a very challenging shape that I found that just making a frame seemed to help a lot. But even with the frame, it just meant I was basically going back over things I had already done and just trying to make it a little bit better. It was a lot of work. This project took me way longer than I ever thought it would. It's the main reason why the videos have been so slow lately, because I've been spending all my time on this ship. So next I had to try to figure out how I was going to make the rudder. It started out as just like a flat shape, and I've kind of left it like that for a little while, just to have something there as like a placeholder. Eventually I'd come back to it, but I needed to get rid of all the water inside the hull. We can't have leaky ship, you know, it would sink if there was water in here. We don't want to sink our ship before we even put it out to float. So then we needed to make the deck of the ship, and I decided I wanted to use polished basalt as the deck. I thought it looked really good as like an aged, almost like driftwood looking piece. Looks really cool. The problem is that I needed a ton of it. So what did I do? Well, I built a basalt generator. It's very basic, literally just used blue ice, lava, and soul soil. Super simple to build. I might even do a tutorial on it sometime. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see that. So I made a boo-boo and I accidentally turned the deck into a mini mob farm. Oops. But it didn't take long before I went back to my own derpy self and dug myself a hole right into the creeper farm. Luckily there weren't any creepers in there ready to blow me up. And then I just went on to go finish building the deck. Looks pretty nice if you ask me. Then I moved on to the front of the hull. I didn't like how the front end was super tall and it didn't look quite like the ship that we were trying to mimic. It looks like as though I needed to take the hull down just a little bit up in the front. So that's what I did. So what I've seen of these old ships, in the front there's a few windows up near where the masts go. And I wanted to make sure I had those windows, which looked almost like what you would assume where the captain would be. Which meant I needed to lower the deck a little bit so that way it would look as if you could actually go into these areas. And I wanted to make sure I mimicked those windows so it gave it a ghastly appearance, as if there's some life going on behind the scenes. Obviously, we won't be able to put actual things in here that actually move around because, well, it's Minecraft. So we just have to use our imagination. And I think these shroom lights do a really good job of giving it a really lifelike appearance. So then I went on to go test a few different ideas for the deck to try to spruce it up a bit, but it felt like something was missing. So then I decided I needed to add more lights to the rear of the ship. Basically, this is going to be the area where the living quarters would be on the back of the ship, or potentially storage, stuff like that. And the lights just add so much life to the ship that I think it was just necessary to add it back here. Because it was just looking a little too dull, too bland. It was all one color, and I just think it needed more color. But after I got all that done, it was finally time to start tearing down the AFK spot and putting up the masts. This was going to be one of the biggest and most difficult parts of this entire build. It's a lot of work to build these things. Now there's one trick I want to show you that I learned from somebody when I was streaming this. It's that you can place trap doors on a block outside of where you're building and flip it up, and it'll actually connect in this gap. It took me forever to figure that out, and all I had to do was chop the block, and I had a completely connected trap door log. I mean, it just looks amazing. As far as crow's nests go, I mean, eventually I was going to have to readjust where I put the crow's nest, but for the time being, it was a really, really cool tip, and I'm really glad that I had that help. But now it's time to work on the sails. And holy cow, these sails took me forever to design. I can't tell you how many times I had to build, rebuild, and I was going nuts trying to get this correct. The real challenge of making these sails is trying to get it to look like as if it's actually flowing in the wind. Now for me, I didn't build mine on a diagonal like most people would do. I built it just straight on, just because that's the direction of the ship. I wanted it to be a fairly simple thing that I knew I could kind of come up with on my own, but also I wanted it to actually look like it fit with the rest of the build. This just meant I had to make the sails at different scales. The first sails up at the very top were a lot smaller than the ones at the bottom, and I just needed to basically adjust the scale as I went. I would build a little bit, tear apart, rebuild, and just kind of go with the flow. There was no real plan when I came together with making this, and it took a long time to come up with this design. But once I had the design down, it was just a matter of rinse and repeat. And by rinse and repeat, I mean I was literally a washing machine. The amount of time that it took to actually build these sails was astronomical. I mean, I literally thought by the end of this thing I was going to lose my mind. I spent almost as much time gathering resources as I did placing them. It was insane. But I have to say, I was extremely pleased with how well this thing was starting to come together, even if it was coming at the cost of my own sanity. But then again, I wasn't all that sane to begin with, so, I didn't have that much to lose. So I figured I may as well put the time in and have something that looks really nice when we're done with it. So after I got the first set of sails done, I had to take a step back and look and just see if the scale looked right, see how the size was, and from what I could tell, it all looked pretty good. Now the tricky part was going to be the sail in the rear. That was going to require a unique design because it almost looks like a fin. So I just basically hung a frame on there to get an idea of what I was working with. Kind of looked at it from a distance, and I was really happy with the shape, but it needed a little bit of tweaking. So we went back at it and kind of tweaked it a bit. We gave it a little bit sharper of a curve and just made it to where it kind of looked a little bit 3D by bringing it out just a little bit. It's just enough to make it look as if maybe the wind was pushing it. Well, that was until this creeper showed up and decided he wanted to try to ruin my day.
Hey, pull my finger.
I really don't want to pull your finger, please, God. Oh, what are you doing? Hey, get back. The good news is I have good armor, so he wasn't a big problem for me anymore. He just made the build a little bit more of a pain to finish up. So after we fixed the creeper hole, the rest was pretty simple. It was all a matter of just filling in and making it look as if it was a flowing piece of fabric. I think it turned out really good. The only thing we had left to do was just adding a frame to it. Very, very simple. Sometimes simple isn't always a bad thing, though. And all was going well until I realized that I built this sail one block off. I think at this point I was just going nuts from being awake so long. This was a really long project, and it took a lot out of me to be able to get this thing done, but I wasn't about to give up now just because of one dumb mistake. So I just basically went and I extended it out one block to the left and cut it in one block from the right. But boy, was I ever glad to get this thing done. Then it was on to making the front mast. Now this piece is kind of weird, and it's kind of a weird shape, but I tried to do it as best as I could with the resources I had. And for some reason we generated these little pirates that decided to show up. I guess they think it's their ship now. But before I could hang the final sail, I wanted to get a good view of it from a distance just to see if it was looking right. And I think it's looking pretty good. So then I decided to replace some of the blocks with some of the crimson blocks just to make it look a little bit more contrasted, add a little bit more color to the build, and just make it look overall just a little bit nicer. I think adding it made a really nice touch to the build. I mean, look at that. And then all I had to do was add the final sail, which this one was a little tricky because of the scale of it. It's kind of small, but I think I managed to pull it off. So then the tricky part was getting all the crow's nests put up. I put 3 in total. So then to give it like an old withered look, I ended up using vines all the way around the boat. And then this strange thing happened when I was putting up these cables to support all the masts. This weird guy showed up.
Hey, I was coming here to sell some stuffs, and hey, buddy, you want to buy my
But I
stuff?
took care of him
Hey, what are you
pretty
doing?
easily.
Hey, this isn't great.
Bye-bye.
Curse you, Sergeant Dupes.
Well, at least I got some leads out of the deal. And with that, I present to you the Flying Dutchman.
The Flying Dutchman was a sea captain who once found himself struggling to round the Cape of Good Hope during a ferocious storm. He swore that he would succeed, even if he had to sail until Judgment Day. Well, the devil heard his oath and took him up on it. The Dutchman was condemned to stay at sea forever. His only hope for salvation was to find a woman that loved him enough to declare herself faithful to the Dutchman for life, no matter what. To top it all off, he could only stop sailing once every 7 years to go ashore and search for that one true love. After many years at sea, the Flying Dutchman would come to find many women, but none that would stay with him for all of eternity. That is until one year when he was coming ashore, and he met a woman named Senta. She was the daughter of a great sea captain, and she had heard great tales of the Flying Dutchman, and was eager to meet him. Now you may not believe it love at first sight, but when the Flying Dutchman first saw Senta, he declared his love for her, and she declared her love for him. And the Flying Dutchman thought that that would break the curse, but she hadn't yet proven her loyalty. There was another man that was in love with Senta, a man named Eric, and he became jealous of the Flying Dutchman, so much so that he called her out for infidelity. And when the Flying Dutchman was leaving port without her, to show her true loyalty to the Flying Dutchman, she jumped from a bluff into the sea and perished, and at the same time broke the curse of the Flying Dutchman.
So I really hope that you enjoyed that story. It was a really interesting story when I was reading about it, and that's the story that got me interested in actually making this ship. It was something that I just thought, man, this would be so cool to replicate in Minecraft. Something that I think it looks so cool, and especially from the perspective of the player, it had a really cool story behind it, and I just thought it would be something really neat to build. But I'll tell you, I did not expect just how difficult it was going to be to actually make this thing. I mean, you get scale from the distance, but when you're actually on the ship, you get a much better idea of how big this thing is, and it's just insane. It really is. I mean, it's so cool. I love the way this thing looks, and I really want to turn this area into something functional. I mean, under it, we have the creeper farm, obviously, but I want to do more with this. I want to make it to where it's an even more usable space and stuff like that, but it's just such a cool idea, the way that it sits out here, like as if it's coming into port from the 7 years. I don't know what these guys are from, but they just showed up. Maybe we'll even use them somehow. I'm not sure yet, but I gotta tell you, I've been working on this thing for about a couple weeks now, and it's just been a total grind. I mean, look at how cool this thing is just from the distance, just sitting out here in the bay, like as if it's just come into dock. I mean, it just fits so well. I love the look of this thing. I mean, it probably could use a few improvements here and there, but for the most part, I think it looks really, really cool. I mean, look, this is what we're going to see every time we come through the portal and come over here. I mean, that's just how big that thing is. I mean, it totally changes the way the horizon is. It may even be a little too big. I mean, it's crazy. Just out of curiosity, let's take a look at just how many blocks it took to do this. Okay, look at this. So we've got over 5,000 of these warped planks put in here. Bare minimum. 7,000 of them crafted. I mean, that's insane all on its own, and that's just that one block. Okay, holy crap, look at that. So we actually mined over 6,000 of these warped wart blocks, and we placed over 4,000 of them. Oh my goodness. Here's the stairs. Look at that. Over 3,000 of those suckers. Oh yeah, look at that. We mined over 3,000 of these warp stems. I mean, think about that. If you get maybe on average between 5 to maybe 10 in an actual mushroom, that is a lot of grinding. Holy cow. So yeah, all those blocks went into all of these things here. I mean, it's crazy the amount of pieces that went into this. It is just huge. But the problem is that it takes way too much time to do. I mean, as you can tell, I think the last video I did was almost 2 weeks ago. It's kind of an issue. And it's kind of a tricky balance between making videos and making content and building really epic builds like this. This just took way too much time, and it took away from making videos. I mean, the whole time I was building this, I was streaming it, so we did do some streams over on Twitch, but it made the videos on YouTube a lot slower. So I have to figure out a better plan for the future so that way I can keep these things coming out. Hey, so if you made it this far into the video, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much. Because you actually stuck through it, you got to see the final product, and you got to see the entire video the way that it was designed to be seen. And I appreciate you, because not everybody makes it this far. So that makes you one of the best. But anyway, I hope you have a great day, and I'll be sure to see you in the next one.